Over here. Okay, we are live. I'm going to make sure we're viewed okay over here on my page. I think people can see me. Okay, everyone. So it's Tracy. It's Tough Love Tuesday, and I have a special guest with me tonight, Dr. David Mobley. So say hi to David, Dr. D.
Hey everyone.
Yeah.
Excited to
So
be here.
hi. So we're going to give people a few minutes to kind of find us. So if you're watching on Facebook, you should be able to see a link that says if you want to comment through StreamYard, click that link because then we can see your comments in the in our. Okay, I see. Okay, so I see Dave. So anyone else out there, just give a shout out so we can know that we're seeing you. So anyway, it's Tough Love Tuesday, and I've been wanting to get Dr. Mobley on here for a while because he exemplified that with me. We're going to talk about a little bit about the story of how I met him and how he impacted my life in such a phenomenal way. I had a knee injury from 2005, and it was from a snowmobiling accident. And I never really recovered fully from it. I ended up having a couple surgeries, and then I just never quite got it back in order. And still, I think it was 2017 when I met you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a long time. I was walking with dysfunction. I was afraid to do so many things. And one day I was at the gym. Granted, I'd been doing century bike rides and stuff, but you could barely get me to jump off of a step. I barely did. There were things that terrified me. So I was at the gym, and you were there with a table, and you were called Rock Doc.
Well, I had my rock tape set up
Yeah.
to tape anyone who wanted to try it that day.
Yeah. And I walked past you, and I was like, no one's going to be able to help me anyway. I'm just going to keep going. And then someone told me to stop and turn around. And I went up to you and I said, can you help me? And that was the beginning. And you did. So tell everyone a little bit about you, and then we can go more into the story of, how things changed and mindset and stuff like that.
Yeah, my name is Dave Mobley. I'm a sports chiropractor. I currently practice out at Tangelo Manual Therapy and Movement. We have 3 clinics in Seattle. I'm over at our West Seattle clinic right now. It's kind of the West Seattle Island. But yeah, we have an interesting approach to treatment. So we obviously take someone in, kind of see where they're at. We are chiropractors by trade, but we're sports chiropractors. So we have a heavy emphasis on corrective exercise and movement through treatment on top of all the chiropractic adjusting and manual therapy that we do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yeah.
a hybrid approach. It's a little bit different than traditional chiropractors. It looks a little bit like PT with little bit more hands-on work, and then tailoring our corrective exercise to the specific person and not just a generic sheet of paper.
And that's what I truly believe was the difference, because I'd been to physical therapy, I don't know how many times. And I still had a horrible dysfunction of the way I walked, the way I moved, and a horrible fear because one of the things you did with me, and this was probably before you even went to Angelo, was when literally, you guys, was this bad. I don't know how many, it was 2 weight plates, right? A
Yeah.
couple, and how many inches tall?
3.
Like 3 inches tall. And he's like, come on, you can jump off of this. And I'm not lying, you guys. I started crying. I was so afraid because I had so much dysfunction with that leg. It'd been so long that my brain had kind of cut it off. And then it didn't allow me to walk with a normal gait. It didn't let me jump. I mean, if I jumped, I'd jump wrong. So I'd hurt it. And you were able to, help me get through so much of that fear.
Yeah. And that's a big aspect for a lot of people, and especially someone like yourself who had this type of pain going on for so long. You start to like build these fears, and you just
Mm-hmm.
think that these things aren't possible anymore, and all of
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. So I don't remember which visit number that was that I had you jump in, but I know it wasn't visit number one. We definitely did some work and kind of built you up to get to that point for sure.
Yeah, it was you know, I had I remember once even too, I was so flustered because I didn't even know how to get out of the car the right way anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't get out of the car without hurting myself. And so I realized I was getting out of a car like somebody who was probably 95 years old, 100 years old. I didn't, and you took me, you literally took me out to my car. But I had a lot of hangups, and it was based on fear. I didn't know how to communicate, you know, in the right way with that leg. And and today and I hadn't been running. I I hadn't been doing hardly any. I could bike. I could get on a bike, and I was doing century rides, but that was all I could do.
Yeah.
And so talk me through kind of the way you think about um, trying to use kinetic chain dysfunction and how to help somebody through pain. Like what are some of the things you used on me?
The biggest and the biggest thing I look for with people coming in is really identifying what hurts, what got them in the pain that they're in. Sometimes that's a traumatic thing. A lot more times it's doing too much too soon or not enough for too long. And what we find is people get kind of caught in the same movement pattern, and then it hurts and they don't have enough different movement strategies to move in other ways that don't hurt. Um,
Mhm,
the and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more as we go, but the big ones we see are like the knee collapsing in, or poor hip control, poor low back control, poor foot position and arch control. Sometimes these can be the cause of pain, and that's the reason, obviously, they're in pain. Sometimes we can correct that and get them out of pain. Um,
mhm,
all of these things that I just mentioned, though, are kind of tough things to talk about in terms of what the research supports, because
mhm,
like the knee control and knee falling inward, there's a lot of people out there running who don't have very good knee control, but they don't have knee pain. So
mhm,
that's a tough one. But then if you have someone who has knee pain, and then if we can correct that knee position and uh, direct the knee, like tracking in a better position and using more of the hip muscles, we can get them out of
mhm.
pain. So
And I think you found with me that I was not using my glutes at all. I think all my lunges, anything I was doing, I was using the front of my legs, and
yeah,
I had lazy, lazy, lazy glutes. And and then I was also my knees when I would get up out of a chair when I was doing anything, my knees would collapse in. And so and even as much as the way my feet were
yeah,
positioning and stuff. And I think that's where if what was so profound, I was so focused on that knee that's where I was pushing, and I was pushing that knee, and that knee was going to do it. And
yeah,
but then when I wanted to go do anything, I hadn't hiked in years. I hadn't, like I said, going up and down stairs was like traumatic, and so getting that in where I understood that the body has to function as a whole. We may look at a knee, but it could be a hip flexor. It could be a foot problem. I mean,
for sure. Yeah,
so that was just incredible. And it's this
yeah,
between the
definitely.
ears.
And that's a big thing we talk about with folks is, hey, like, what are your thoughts about your pain? How
Mm,
is what if you have any fears with certain
Mm-hmm.
movements, that's definitely going to affect you.
That's me.
Um, and addressing those as we go, because it's not always the thing that we really try to tell folks is the pain level that you have doesn't necessarily equal the tissue damage that's occurring with your body.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's been told that they have major tissue damage, more times than not, there's still things you can do with movement to help make you feel better.
Hmm. Yeah. I think too, a big thing for me was because I had so much fear. And and again, I remember times you were working on my knee and all that, and you're like, "No, don't kick me, don't kick me." 'Cause I feel like I don't like you right now,
Yeah.
and some of it was. I remember we were trying to get my mind because my mind was so honed in, and it still does this to me. It's searching that leg all the time, up and down, up and down, up and down, over and over. Is there anything wrong? Should I be watching? Wait, what was that? And it's
Yeah.
really interesting breaking that habit and letting my body just move like it's supposed to.
Yeah. And what I tell folks, this is a perfect example, is pain is like an alarm and a request for change. And when you've been in pain for so long, that request for change might be totally like failed, faulty alarm going off,
Mhm.
where you might be moving perfectly, but your body still feels kind of weird, and it's taking more time to kind of just retrain the system to be okay with a certain movement.
Mhm.
So that's definitely a real thing, and there's a level of confidence you have to have that, hey, like, even though this might be a little uncomfortable, I'm still going to do it because
Mhm.
I'm going to move well with how people have cued me to move. Um, and we're going to get through this without any flare ups.
Yes. And I think that was a lot of it too. Being, as a patient, you are really vulnerable. And I really allowed myself to, well, number one, you were just so compassionate and patient and understanding. And that's one thing that I thought about you too when I started talking with you, is I felt, you had a different concept of, as a doctor, you see the whole person. That's your background, and you see the whole body as one body. And and so, as a patient, that was so important to me, you know, and then I'd start crying about something I didn't want to do or I was afraid of. You were so you'd see my eyes start to go, and you're like, "Oh, there
Uh-huh.
she goes."
Like triggering some PTSD here.
Yeah, but knowing that you understood that and could walk me through that, and I would leave the session maybe, like, whoa. But I would felt always like I had gotten a little step further, and
Yeah.
I began to definitely trust you, and I knew you would not lead me astray. And now it's like, yeah, it was just an incredible experience for me. And I remember too, when you were changing practices, it was funny. And of course I followed you as best I could, but
Uh-huh.
you're like, no, no, try and put me on the nest. You're gonna, we have to, ooh,
Yeah. Taking the training wheels off.
yeah, it was really hard. But like I said, it was it was really interesting how I was, just because I had been in such a trauma state with that knee for so long. I couldn't dance anymore. I still have a hard time getting it to be able to get it to trigger as fast as I would need it to for certain things. But it's nothing like it was before. But I figure that injury had taken me out of so many things.
Yeah,
you know, and so there was a lot of loss because of that injury. And so to have you understand the mind body connection and
yeah,
how it all works was exactly, what I needed.
for sure. And to circle back, this approach is technically called the biopsychosocial model of pain. And to kind of pick that term apart, that's bio. So we do take into account, like, hey, is there any major tissue damage here, or what's
Mhm.
going on with the biology? And then the psycho is kind of like what's going on in the head, like what are our beliefs about what we think is going on? What have we been told that's going on? And then the social aspect is like, hey, we're humans, we move our bodies, we want to be able to go out and be with other people and do other activities.
Mhm.
How is this pain impacting how we perceive that those changes and those other groups of people are going to think about us? Like, so
Mhm.
there's a lot going on here, and this model of looking at pain is becoming more and more popular. So I'm quite optimistic that a lot of young docs out there with chiropractors and PTs are kind of adopting this model and really seeing that we can make a lot more impactful change without just talking about structures and
Mhm.
damage. And it kind of opens up the door for progressing through treatment and getting people feeling really good and in a really good place. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. The whole, being in that clinic with you and that whole team. And again, I didn't even want to be referred over. I wanted you to work with me all the time. And
Uh-huh.
you had to say, now come on, Tracy. They're,
Uh-huh.
they're really good, and I'm like, I don't want to say that. It's really funny because I was so worried, and anybody that you handed me to, that the staff are just phenomenal. And I think um, what I appreciated again was it's not about just getting somebody back to where they can kind of do something. It's about getting them back to living again, to experiencing life again, to to feel vibrant in their body as much as you can. It's just a whole different concept.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And just a little insights. Reason I also wanted to bring you on was, I got my book published, and the way I coach people is based on, there's more than just food. It's more than just, all of that, but it's your physical activity, your health, joy, spirituality, relationships. All of these things are part of your life. And, um, you know, and when I wrote a chapter about movement, and I put in that chapter so much of what I learned through my experience with you and discussing the fear associated with movement. And then, to really go and find you can interview several doctors, but finding a doctor that does see you as a whole person and
Yeah.
all of that is so important. And because if we have pain over here and we can't move, we can't do things, that'll affect the way we
It's
eat,
hard to,
probably the
yeah.
way we relate to other people.
It's hard to be happy in general.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And
Yeah.
so when you were, um, again, back to, we had times when you would do work on my knee that it kind of hurt a lot during the treatment, you
Uh-huh.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the concept of, some of that just to get the body past a certain point, but just kind of explain a little bit of that,
Yeah.
that you
So
did with me with that.
from the stuff we did to explain to folks a little bit more who are watching, we got into a lot of manual therapy, um, with digging in, like my hands on, digging into tight spots around your knee and around the hip. um, that's doing a lot of different things. It's kind of decreasing tension, decreasing pain, bringing awareness to these other muscles that we want to recruit and use. It is kind of a temporary effect. And I like to stress that point because people, I think, too often rely on passive care. Um,
Mhm.
so if you are only going to a massage therapist or only going to a chiropractor, you probably need to match that treatment up with movement and exercise to help solidify those changes that we can
Mhm.
make with manual therapy. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
if I remember right, did we do some cupping in
Yes.
session? Yep. So with that, sometimes we see with chronic knee pain, there can be some nerve sensitivity around the knee, and cupping does a really good job at desensitizing those nerve endings
Mm-hmm.
within the skin around the knee. And especially if we're moving in ways that are kind of pissing off those nerves,
Mm-hmm.
cupping does a really good job at desensitizing those and kind of dampening down that alarm that's going off when it shouldn't be going off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
because mine definitely was anything I did, it just wanted to tell me about it.
yeah, yeah. You have a really good alarm.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
And I just still I go back to, you know, taking someone that had been so in such dysfunction for so long, and then being able to, um, you know, go ahead and watch the way I moved, and then being able to say, okay, let's tweak this, let's do that, and make me aware. You were able to really help me understand how my body movement was not assisting me, and how it was how my effort to protect myself was causing basic
Yeah,
problems for
you're kind
myself.
of in this feedback loop of like being in pain, waiting until it goes away, doing a little bit and then doing too much, and then all of a sudden you're back in pain.
Hmm.
And we see that a lot. And a lot of
Yeah.
times when we have something like knee pain, if we're going to a chiropractor or a physical therapist, and if they're only looking at your knee, that's kind of a yellow flag of like, hey, there's probably more you can work on with looking at how the hip is moving and working, what's
Hmm.
going on down at the feet, kind of tying everything together and looking at the whole system as a unit of movement and how things
Hmm.
are supporting other things. And if we can wake up some of the hip muscles to take a little bit of stress off the knee for a little bit, that's probably a good thing to get
Hmm.
back to some of the activities you want to be doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's definitely a lot going on.
Well, and a great example of what I did then, because I was so excited, I'd found my glute muscles.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, yeah,
Yeah.
glutes. Well, what I didn't realize was like spinning and all of that. I thought I was using all my glutes. I blew out, I gave myself Achilles tendonitis in both of my Achilles. You remember that.
Yeah.
That in my zealousness, that took me like 12 months of like trying to get out of that, and I could
Yeah.
actually, so I was there for that because I was like, yeah, I found him. I found my glutes. And then I was like, oh, what is that?
Oh,
What did I just
no.
do to myself? So
Yeah.
yes, the fine line of,
Yeah.
you know, not doing that.
And
So,
for the listener, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, go.
Oh, I was going to say for the listeners at home, like most of the injuries we see in the clinic are injuries that people are just doing too much too soon. And so the Achilles example there, like you may have just ramped way too much too soon, ramped up too
Yep.
quick, and kind of landed with that.
Yep.
So it can be a tedious process because we take folks through all sorts of different injuries in the clinic. And if someone
Hmm.
wants to get back to running and they had been running, 10 miles at a time, but it hurts when they get to a half mile, we're going to start off at running a quarter mile and see how it feels and slowly ramping up from there. But
Hmm.
it's this concept of kind of graded exposure of doing a little bit, seeing how the body tolerates it. You're going to rest, heal, become stronger, and then do it again with adding a little bit at a time. And then all of a sudden you're a stronger, more durable human.
And that hits it right on the nail because I know you didn't know I was doing this insane spitting.
Uh-huh.
so this time, when I got to where I could walk and the pain in my Achilles wasn't so bad. I did exactly what you just said. I'm going to walk a little bit, scale back just a little bit more each day, stretch as I walk. If it starts hurting, I'm going to slow down and stretch. And each day I just added a little more. And then all of a sudden I was like, I wonder if I can run again. And I thought, I'll just add a little bit of running and then I'll pull it back. And 12 and a half months later, I'm like, I remember the one time it was like, I wonder if I can run this hill, but I was nervous about it. And I thought, well, just do the gradual, So I'm like, oh my God, I'm running hills again. And I'm, I'm hiking again. And I'm, doing all this stuff because I was patient.
Yeah. And it's that rebuilding process. And what I tell folks, and I think I've told you this too, is like when you're working through an injury, sure, you want to try to change things when you do have pain. But even if you do have a little bit of discomfort and that discomfort is like a 2 or 3 out of 10 or less, and it's not getting worse as you're going, you're probably okay to continue. And kind of reassessing how you feel after. And obviously, I don't want anyone taking medical advice on this. So if you have something going on, go in and get evaluated.
Yeah.
But typically, low levels of pain doesn't necessarily mean you're doing a lot more damage to the injury that you have. So,
and that was a big thing for me because sometimes it still gets, my tendon still gets a little upset, and I know now it's my hip flexor I got to work on, but I know now that I don't have really anything. It's not going to get worse, and I definitely dancing still. It doesn't like twisting a lot. It doesn't like those things, but I think if I continue and get stronger and I'm kind to myself.
Yeah. One thing to challenge you, Tracy, would be dance for 20 seconds tonight. See how it feels. Okay. Tomorrow night you're dancing for 30 seconds.
That's right.
Next night, 40 seconds.
Okay. You're going to have me boogieing on here pretty soon.
So
I love it.
That's our idea of just sprinkling in and adding a little bit as we go. And then before you know it, I think you'd be back to full speed.
Yeah. Yeah. And my other thing is, because, if anyone wants to follow you, you've got a great Instagram.
Oh, thank you.
Account. But I'm still working on my squats. I want to do a full squat. So I know I've got to still get those hips. Those hips are still too tight. And but can you give one myth, a couple myth busters for everybody? I saw you had a couple on Instagram that were really good.
Yeah. So one of my favorites is that the knees should not track over the toes when we squat down. And this was kind of, I don't know who made this up, but it's kind of been rooted in physical medicine for a long time. And it's simply not true. I think if you were to notice what your knees are doing all day, you'd probably already translate your knees over your toes quite a bit. But typically our knee joints are strong and healthy enough to handle that load. Now, obviously, if you have pain with squatting and it happens when your knees track over your toes, then you might want to change some things for a little bit, and you might want to add in some knee exercises. But then eventually you should be able to return to a squat with the knees transitioning forward. Typically what we find in the clinic and with different folks working out outside of the clinic is if we have a more hip dominant squat, that the knees tend to like that better too. But that doesn't mean that the knees can't translate forward. So what I'm saying there is as you squat down, you might want to try to send your hips back as you go down, but then it's fine if your knees translate forward in the deeper portions of the squat.
And I think that was the biggest lesson for me was when I was squatting, I wasn't putting those glutes back, and so maybe there's still a I don't want to say it. Like there's ways to do it. There's ways to do a squat, but you definitely want your butt going backwards, and then your knees can go over. Yeah. Because I wasn't doing that.
You make it tough if you have stiff hips and stiff ankles and a stiff mid back, then all of a sudden things are getting stressed in weird ways and it doesn't feel too great.
Yeah. And one thing you asked me, because I was tight in the hips and my Achilles tendons. And you asked me, because I couldn't keep my feet flat on the floor. And you asked me, had I worn high heels a lot. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm an 80s girl, we wear heels all the time.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. So, that those tendons and everything will shorten up and make it harder to keep them flat. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Okay, we have one more moment, and we can get one more debunker, myth buster.
Another myth. Okay. Let's see.
If you have one, I don't know.
Yeah, another good myth would be that we should never flex or round forward our low back.
Ooh.
And so this is one that if you've been in the fitness space and you've learned how to do deadlifts or kettlebell swings, you've likely been told, never flex your spine, never round your low back forward. And in terms of weightlifting, that might be true, that it might be a good idea to try to keep a neutral spine. But in terms of everyday life, I don't think it's realistic, and I don't think it's very accurate to say that we should never flex our low back, because there's been studies that show that even when you try to keep a very neutral spine, we're not very good at actually keeping a neutral spine, and that there might be some forces that kind of pull us into that flexed position.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a tough one, though, because it kind of goes back to this idea of what we've been doing versus what our back and kind of tissue capacity is. So if you're not very active and then you go in and do 100 sit-ups, or you're doing some vacuuming and you're flexing your back 100 times, then yeah, that's going to likely light things up and not feel too great. But in terms of slowing up your capacity for low back health, it's typically not an issue. We just want to train it like we would train anything else in the gym.
Okay, I have one more question, because this is so good. And I'm going to have you back, because this is also good. But why is it so important that your body is allowed to move?
Oh, man. That's a very general question, Tracy.
That is there's like so much to it, but I think we have forgotten as a society how important it is that we let our bodies move. And it's not just to stay great looking in a swimsuit or clothes. It's
right.
Yeah. I mean, there's more to it.
I think in general, there's probably a laundry list of things that we could talk about. I think for your listeners, though, if you're needing to get into an exercise routine, I would find the 1, 2, or 3 things that create the why for your movement routine. Meaning, like, if it's just that you want to look better or feel better when you bend over and pick up your kid or grandkid, or making sure that you can still hike when you're 80, like, having these whys is really going to drive your purpose for getting up early and getting in some movement and making it a routine.
Yeah.
But you're totally right. And especially when we have these lockdowns going, it's important to get going, taking your full emotion. Obviously, there's mental health aspects that are pretty profound, just in the sense of staying happy and healthy in that regard. But yeah, the list is long: skin health, strength.
Yeah. Oh, Gretchen has this comment. She says, I'd like to hear more about hand injuries. Yeah, she's got some pretty rough hand injuries that she's trying to work on. But yeah, I should, I don't know if you can see the comments. You might not be able to see them.
Yeah.
We have to figure out how to use StreamYard still. Can you see on the right-hand side, there should be a comment. You can click on there, but yeah, so while he's thinking about that, for me, movement is so important. We're in such a sedentary, society now, and movement is so healthy for our brain. It helps us to stay engaged. it's so needed. And, we could do probably 15 to 20 shows on that. But yeah, so Gretchen, she says, I'd like to hear more about hand injuries. That's a pretty general question, but yeah.
Gretchen, do you have any specific questions? I'll try to answer the best I can.
Yeah, go ahead. I know somewhat of it, but she pulled, when she was moving one day, she had a bar that had her clothes on it, like a temporary rack, and it collapsed and it pulled her thumbs all the way back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tinnitus and trigger finger, moving injury. Yeah. I know there's hope for her.
4 years is a long time, but there's still, like you said, lots of hope for making changes with that. That's a tough one without doing an exam and seeing exactly what's going on. I'd be curious, have you seen a physical therapist or a sports chiropractor?
Definitely not a sports chiropractor. Maybe I need to get her in touch with you. We'll get her into the clinic.
There's definitely a lot of different exercises. I see, like you said, massaging the thumb, but also working into the forearm and making sure the whole system is working well there. The hand stuff sometimes just takes a long time and persistence with keeping up with different exercises to regain like strength and calming down tendons.
Yeah. Okay. Can you believe it's 7:37?
Oh yeah.
It's been really good.
So yeah.
Yeah. So people can find you personally at the West Seattle.
Yeah.
Tangelo.
I'm at Tangelo in West Seattle. With COVID going on, this is kind of, I was going to say a tough time, but also an exciting time. I was going to offer to your viewers, we are set up with virtual care. If anyone wants to reach out, we can get some stuff set up in that regard. And
that's great.
Even doing we do free 15-minute consultations, so we can also set that up as a virtual thing if
that's awesome.
If you want to jump on a call, or if any of your listeners want to hop on.
Absolutely. Can you when we let's see, Gretchen says no, she's no sports expert. My whole hand has been affected and I keep re-injuring myself. It's affected both hands. She wants to touch base with you. Okay, great. Yeah. So what we'll do is we will put in the comment feed once we hang up. Dr. Mobley will go in and you can put the link or how to get a hold of you there. And I hope anybody listen, if you've given up, I had given up. I was in I'm going to start crying. I was in such a state that it was over for me, and so don't ever give up. I will always be so grateful for that day walking by and there's this young doctor just with
hanging out.
rock tape. I thought maybe rock tape, just stick something on my knee, please, And
well, props to you too for like making that effort and getting out of your comfort zone to ask me too.
Yeah, I just knew that I had to keep looking, and now I'm a trainer myself, and just I still have this little bit still left that I'm dealing with, but honestly, don't give up on yourself. Keep seeking and searching, learn about your body, take the time, because you could be sitting around watching TV for 3-4 hours in a day when maybe you could be reading about how a body functions.
Yeah, and even if it's just a little bit each day. And
yeah.
One thing I like to stress to folks too is if you can't make it to one of our clinics, try to find a good provider who sounds well suited in movement and isn't going to tell you to stop all of your activities when you have pain.
Yeah. And that was the thing. I thought I knew what I wanted for myself. I wanted to be able to be active. I wanted wanted my life back, and I knew that meant a different type of treatment. So anyway, well, I think this has been great, and I got to let you go here, and we'll make sure we get you back on.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We'll do another special appearance sometime soon.
Yes. So don't go anywhere, though. I'll close down the live, but stay there, Dr. D. Okay. All right, everybody. Have a great night. And what can you do tomorrow to allow your body to move? So I'm sure you can find something. Okay. Talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.